which Jet proclaimed that it would be a useless stone to him anyways, since only people of her bloodline could use it. Burke would reply that then it would be a useless stone to both of them, finally equalizing the gap between the two the way it was always meant to be. As he turned to leave, Jet desperately asked him to tell her that he wasn't the one who assassinated the king, and that he hadn't been the one to set all of this into motion. But Burke merely told her that this was one secret that he wasn't ready to surrender. He then turned to leave just as Jet began to lose consciousness. From this point on, Jet would seek to recover parts of the core and discover the truth behind Burke's betrayal. Leveling her reveals more about her story and how it ends. It's actually quite an interesting story with a nice ending, and I've left out some details to keep it short, but the full story can be found on the wiki, to which I'll leave as a link in the description. Jet as a job had a very fast playstyle and had some unique characteristics. She had two unique beginner skills, Retro Rockets, which was simply a passive buff that raised her movement speed, and Core Aura. This was a variable buff system that can be linked to another one of your characters on the same world. The numeric value of each stat, strength, dex, intellect, and so on can be different for each Jet character, and the stats will randomly change after a certain interval of time. You can reset the Core Aura stats by purchasing Supernova Dust, which is an NX item, or getting Stardust from monsters. Even until now, this passive remains an incredibly unique system. Jet was the only job in the game with a variable buff system. In her first job, we can already see where the high speed movement playstyle comes from. She had another passive buff, Comet Booster, which increased her movement speed, and Glide Blast, which was Jet's movement skill. Her second job mostly added to her gun skills, allowing her to fire more shots at a time and making them deal more damage. Jet's third job advancement is where we start to see some skills that really give her the machinist aesthetic. She starts to use technology to assist her in battle with skills like Solar Array, Gamma Missile, and Turret Deployment. Although turret deployment wasn't a great skill and was quite niche, it still added to the overall theme. And finally, fourth job, which was the last job advancement in 2012. Rapid Fire was a flashy skill that had Jet fire bullets in a rapid fashion. It resembles Mercedes' Ishtar Ring skill. Starfall literally summons Jet's spaceship to hail down lasers across the whole screen. Brain Scrambler was an uncommon skill in that it shoots a monster in the head to eliminate it in one shot, and deals a very high damage to enemies that can't instantly be one-shot. Suborbital Bombardier summons a sharpshooting giant robot that fires a barrage of bullets, but they look more like lasers in my opinion. And lastly, my favorite skill, Mighty Meteor, which causes Jet to toss a meteorite at a mob, then all future attacks will deal bonus damage. Although being very fun due to having a fast and flashy playstyle, Jet was never really considered a top class. Its damage output, utility, and design stability held it down. Although Core Aura was a unique system, it was an RNG based system at the end of the day, which didn't feel great when you rolled badly. Jet's bossing was weak, mobbing was alright at times, and survivability was low. Shortly after Jet's debut, other Adventurer and Resistance jobs got balance updates in KMS, but Jet was a job available only on GMS and JMS. And if we know anything about Nexon, it's that they care about KMS more than GMS. Earlier updates, less bugs and crashes, better communication from devs to players, better balancing of content, and much more. As other jobs like Kana, Kaiser, and Xenon got released, Jet didn't get anything due to not having KMS support. Players still leveled it for its Link skill though, which increased your damage to bosses. At the end of 2013, Jet was considered pretty weak, falling behind other jobs that had balance patches. This continued to be the case until August 11, 2014, where Jet would finally see some changes. In fact, changes would be an understatement in this case. She got an entire rework titled Jet Reborn. She got a buff to her HP, and all of her job advancement skills were changed. First, her secondary weapon, which could be equipped with core controller items, had been removed and replaced with a new secondary, fist items. They also gave Jet players her ship. As an area in the game, you could now teleport to your own personal spaceship. A large majority of Jet's previous skills were removed, and she was given an entirely new kit. Thus, Nexon also reset all Jet characters' SP so players could reinvest their points. Her rework really dialed in on her fast playstyle and gave her many movement abilities. For Jet's first job advancement, she now gets Starline 1, which dealt 3 quick hits to nearby enemies, and you could keep pressing the key after these hits to follow up with additional moves. Blaster Barrage, firing a pair of shots straight ahead. You could also hold down the skill key for continuous fire and move left and right whilst firing, and Spacewalk, which allows her to triple jump. For her second job advancement, she unlocks Starline 2, which is the same as 1, except now it unleashes beams. Stellar Impact, which smashes a spacecraft to the ground and creates shockwaves which knock enemies into the air, and Vortex Cross, which warps Jet in a direction, hitting enemies. Jet's third job advancement unlocks Starline 3, which is now an uncontrollable dash forward and back, hitting enemies on the way. Falling Stars, which leaps Jet into the air and blasts enemies beneath her. Cosmic Upheaval, which explodes the ground beneath enemies and draws them in. And Spatial Shift, which is a passive ability that enhances Vortex Cross, allowing her to move forward, upward, or downward depending on the key. This also gives her a small amount of iframes during the animation. Lastly, for her fourth job advancement, Jet unlocks Starfall Salvo, her main bossing skill, firing a hail of energy bolts continuously. Backup Beatdown, which summons cool little space ninjas to hit enemies around you. Planet Buster, which is a big damaging move, and Strikeforce Showdown, a passive that had a chance to proc during Starfall Salvo that summoned allies to assist you in blasting enemies. As you can see, a lot of these skills emphasize movement as a core concept, attributing to a fast gameplay. The spaceship she got also had a use as it allowed you to teleport to most town maps once every hour. This job rework was pretty successful and made Jet a lot better in terms of damage output. However, there were still a lot of issues. First, although its power was boosted, it still wasn't competing with the top jobs in terms of damage. Second, the design of some skills in her kit didn't complement with Jet's core gameplay concept. I'll get more into this in a little bit. And lastly, this job rework came with it an abundance of bugs. Visual bugs, gameplay bugs, quest bugs, you name it, Jet probably had a bug with it. And some of these bugs never got resolved even until the job got removed. Going back to the second point, some of the skills didn't make sense to have in Jet's kit. The biggest example of this is Backup Beatdown. This was a skill that summoned space ninjas to attack enemies in a close proximity around you, and when released would deal a bunch of bonus skill damage. This skill was designed with the idea that you would hold the key to deal continuous damage, but the damage from releasing the key was so much greater than the actual skill itself that the optimal way to use it was to tap the key so that it does one tick of the regular skill, then the bonus damage. The reason why this doesn't fit in Jet's kit was because she had too low of an HP pool. To use this skill, you'd have to get close to enemies, which exposes you to danger, and together with Jet's low HP, it just didn't work well. This skill was meant as a replacement to Suborbital Bombardier, but the previous skill was just way better and was Jet's best mobbing skill. Another issue with the design is that Jet lacked a final attack skill. Strikeforce Showdown, the passive that had a chance to proc during Jet's Starfall Salvo, was the final attack skill. And while it was decent, giving Jet a boost in damage when procced, the proc chance at this point was only 2%. This low activation chance made it far weaker than other final attack skills and made Jet's bossing really inconsistent. Sometimes you'd tickle the boss because you get no procs, and other times you would just burst it down because you got 10 procs in a row. And lastly, Jet's hyper skill. I haven't mentioned hyper skills before because a lot of the skills are just buffs to other skills or stats, but she did have one actual skill, Singularity Shock, which hits a single enemy for 15 lines of 800% damage. The issue with the skill wasn't the damage, but instead the incredibly long animation time, and the fact that it was a single target skill. Jet would greatly benefit from having a good mobbing hyper skill, but she didn't get that. Obviously, Singularity Shock did have its uses though, thanks to its high damage and the fact that Jet gets iframes in majority of the skill's animation, allowing her to dodge enemy skills that put you to 1 HP and 1 MP much easier. Jet continued to stay in this state, barely getting any balance updates due to a lack of support from KMS, and most getting a bug fix or two every couple of months. She also appeared in the Stellar Detectives event, which had a medal reward titled I Really Like Jet, which I think is quite cute. Fast forward 2 years in 2016, Maple Story's 5th job update released. After almost a decade of being in the 4th job, Maplers could finally progress further into their skill trees. Jet as a result got Gravity Crush, which summons a large singularity to draw in enemies, and upon detonation deals damage to enemies based on damage dealt while the target was affected by the singularity. This skill sucked. It caused a large amount of lag due to its numerous and fast lines, and it was buggy, and it was never even properly fixed. It was a shame, but Jet remained at the same lackluster spot as it had been for a while. Not to mention, she didn't have any boost nodes for her main damage skills, which is a huge contributor to a lack of damage. In June 2017, Nexon pushed out a long needed buff to Jet, giving her a damage buff on basically all her skills, but nerfing some of the mobility she had. Spacewalk's range was reduced, and some of the passive skills that gave her more max speed were also nerfed. In fact, the spacewalk nerf felt so bad that people were saying it felt worse than other classes' level 1 flash jump, essentially not moving anywhere. That being said though, this patch finally upped Jet's damage a significant portion, which she desperately needed. But some of the previous problems still kind of remained. Her bossing still relied on Strike Force Showdown procs, Gravity Crush still caused lag, and lots of bugs still remained.